Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is November 7th, and we have a packed episode ahead. In this episode, the pterodactyl of the world, Viktor Orbán, has flown to the US to meet with Donald Trump. He will be strongly insisting on a meeting between Putin and Trump in Budapest. Meanwhile, Donald Trump himself is receiving 5 presidents from Central Asian countries. Russia is leaving the game in this region. A stab in the back. For the Kremlin, Serbia might impose sanctions against Russia. They used to get along just fine. And Baku has decided to finally wipe its feet on Lukoil. Russia is once again planning to develop Siberia, projects of the century. And the US is opening a base in Syria. The world is changing rapidly. And Putin is still dreaming of a great Russia which no longer exists and never will again. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on the channel, then subscribe so you definitely won't miss the next episodes. Today, Donald Trump has a busy day with many important meetings. Some of them could really upset Putin, but let's go through everything in order. Today at the White House, Donald Trump will receive Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. And during his visit, Orbán will try to persuade Donald Trump to hold a meeting with Putin, which, according to Orbán's advisors, could help bring an end to the war in Ukraine. The Guardian reports this, citing its own sources. Well, first of all, ahead of the elections that will take place in April, Orbán really wants to lure both Trump and Putin to Budapest to show his electorate, and not just his own, that, look, I am a significant figure, and here are Trump and Putin, and I brought them here, and so on. In other words, this is important to him. His position is very precarious right now ahead of the April elections that will be held in Hungary. Of course, Russian oil and gas are also important, but on the eve of the elections, the priority is precisely to secure this symbolic meeting between Putin and Trump for Orbán. Orbán is now facing an unprecedented domestic political challenge. The opposition is gaining ground quite significantly. Well, essentially, the Kremlin is now using Orbán as a dove of peace. I think that on the eve of the meeting, Orbán spoke with Putin and will offer some enticing deals to Donald Trump. Lately, Orbán has even started to speak out rather aggressively about American sanctions, saying that the US can't dictate to them, that Hungary is sovereign and independent and will decide for itself what and where to buy. Sovereign and independent from everything except Putin and Russian oil and gas. Recently, by the way, Hungary's Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó stated that breaking energy ties between Russia and Hungary is just a pipe dream. He said, "No one will force us to do that." Are you serious? Let me just remind you, after the full-scale invasion, the European Union made a final decision to get rid of Russian energy resources to eliminate this dependency. They gave all countries time, warned them that they were moving toward a complete halt of supplies from Russia. During this time, not only did Orbán fail to find an alternative, but Hungary actually increased its imports of Russian energy resources. Meanwhile, Russian oil and gas revenues plummeted by almost 30% last month. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, what's going on? First of all, sanctions. Secondly, the ruble has indeed strengthened. So take your 30% and sign for it. Right now, by the way, many companies, mainly Indian and Chinese, are still waiting for clarification on how exactly they can make purchases. At the very least, for Russians to start circumventing these sanctions, they need to carry out a whole series of maneuvers. But everyone there has been given a hint. This is something I heard when talking to my American colleagues, that soon there will be a clear explanation for everyone that you shouldn't try to circumvent US sanctions in some clumsy way if they've been imposed. These aren't European sanctions, as they say. Just kidding. European sanctions are serious too, by the way. Here's another important, very important piece of news in the context of the redistribution of global influence. Trump gathered the leaders of the Central Asian countries in Washington and invited them to the White House. Let me remind you, that's Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. From the clips I saw of these meetings, right now the presidents of the Central Asian countries are just in unison. They're calling Trump the president of peace. It's almost like that. Not that they literally came to bow down, but it's very, very close. They're all calling him the president of peace. And I remember that viral video where some crazy old lady, a Putinist, a communist Putinist, is just screaming at the top of her lungs, Putin is the president of peace. I think you remember it, right? That's it. Now Trump is the president of peace. And as Reuters reports, Washington is seeking to strengthen its position in a region that has been under Russian dominance for decades. I'm talking about Central Asia now. But now China is actively advancing its interests there. Essentially now two superpowers are competing for influence over the countries of Central Asia. In fact, China is doing this much more successfully, by the way. Under Putin's rule, the countries of Central Asia are finally coming under China's investment, infrastructure, and protectionist umbrella. China doesn't just trade, it also builds infrastructure. It lays out routes, ports, builds airports and railways. In other words, this is the perfect way to drive a country into dependence by giving out loans. Investing in infrastructure projects, and naturally in this way China is drawing the region into its own orbit. This is the Chinese project One Belt, One Road, which encompasses Central Asia and makes it one of the key corridors of this initiative. It's a very serious, massive project, but it has now stalled precisely because of Russia's war against Ukraine. And of course, it's also necessary to take advantage of Russia's weakening and to twist the arms of that mangy moth regarding the terms of cooperation. So for the countries of Central Asia, this is only a plus. The more the US and China compete for them, the better offers they will receive from both sides. And also, after the CSTO demonstrated its complete ineffectiveness and started to resemble some kind of Politburo meeting, this project will soon end up on the scrap heap of history. So, what do we have as a result? Putin inherited a vast country, 17 million square kilometers, rich in resources, with a sufficient population and with nuclear weapons. A country that at that time was competing with the US for global leadership. After 25 years of Putin's rule, it is China and the US competing for leadership, while Putin is in his fourth year, is fighting in Ukraine and losing geopolitical influence everywhere. For some reason, as I was preparing for this program, I had this association. Well, do you remember the movie Back to the Future? When you could fly into the future in that DeLorean car, visit different timelines, change something in the past, and everything in the future would be different and so on. I had a thought, what if some guy, I don't know, Oleg from Saratov or from Perm in the year 2000 got into a DeLorean and shot forward to 2025? I think he just wouldn't believe his eyes or ears that Putin is still in power after 25 years. Drones and missiles are striking Kursk, Saratov, and the Moscow region. Putin is bogged down, fighting in Ukraine for the fourth year, and Russia has effectively become a raw materials vassal of China. Donald Trump openly tells Putin off, calling him a paper tiger. Oh, and by the way, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. You see, I think this guy would have rushed back to his perm and just sat there quietly saying nothing. He wouldn't have told anyone what he saw. Another stab in the back for the Kremlin, unfortunately for the Kremlin, but fortunately for everyone else. The civilized world, by the way. Friends, if you happen to hear snoring, you're not imagining it. It's my dog's secret snoring. But I have a directional microphone, so it works like this, and you might not even hear it. Secret wasn't in a great mood today. I give him different names depending on his mood. Today, he was plush fury. He was walking around, kicking pillows, throwing himself at people, at dogs, and so on. He just wasn't in the mood today. Once he finished all that, kicked the pillows, flipped things over a bit, he lay down to sleep, and now he's snoring. He's doing everything I probably would do if I were a dog too. So, if you hear snoring, you're not imagining it. Yes, about the stab in the back. The president of Serbia has warned that the country may join sanctions against Russia. It happens. Serbia will not give a guarantee that it won't join sanctions against Russia, said the president of the republic, Aleksandar Vučić. He noted that he himself would like to stick to the decision that was made after the war began. At the time, Serbia condemned the invasion but did not join the sanctions. In Vučić's opinion, this political course has stood the test of time, but that doesn't mean it won't be reconsidered in the future, given that Serbia is striving to become part of the European Union. Well, basically, Putin, you're kind of an okay guy, but excuse me, you're a coward and deaf, just like in the well-known saying. And I'm not going your way, I'm more interested over there. Something like that. We were getting along just fine, weren't we? So why do you all keep betraying Russia? Because global politics is the law of the jungle. Now you'll puff up your Botox-filled cheeks, talk about wiping everyone off the face of the earth, and then your so-called Second Army gets driven out from near Kiev and Kharkiv. The real heroes, the armed forces of Ukraine, are casting you out of there like the devil. And then you end up begging people to buy your oil at a discount. So before you shut off the tap to Europe, do you remember how that was? You said everyone there would die, freeze to death in Europe. You said, I'll turn off the taps, and now you're asking, please buy my oil at a discount. Well, please. You're asking people to buy your oil at a discount, but you're doing it without any respect. And then you end up begging those same Central Asian countries to help you bypass the sanctions and to bring you the necessary components. And those you used to consider your partners. They're no longer partners, but vultures who, as soon as the mangy coyote gets a little weaker, are eager to tear off a bigger piece from him. Well, if we're going to draw a direct analogy with the law of the jungle, then the mangy Akela has missed his mark. Although, of course, it's better not to compare Putin to a wolf, but to Tabaki the jackal. Yet another stab in the back. How much more can Russia take? Well, the port of Baku refused to work with Lukoil's oil after US sanctions. Well, what can you do? So that's it. They won't accept Lukoil's oil anymore. Now Russia will have to transport this oil to the only ice-free port on the Caspian in Makhachkala, which is within range of Ukrainian drones, and they reach it very well. They've already hit it before. What's going on? Why is everyone suddenly wiping their feet on great Russia? And I always suggest one thing to Russians who are obsessed with greatness. I recommend they try one exercise that really gets them riled up. I tell them, go ahead, impose sanctions against the US in response. Seriously, ban the world from buying US oil technologies, ban everyone from using their financial system, and then see who actually follows through with that. Now here, to all the Putin supporters, I'd like to say, this is where your so-called greatness ends. The only sanctions Russia can actually impose are banning American politicians from coming to Russia, which, by the way, they do regularly. I'm sure a lot of people in the US are really upset about that right now. By the way, friends, let me remind you that we currently have an important fundraiser going on for our soldiers, for our defenders. And I'll tell you the rest of the story about the evacuation, a truly unique evacuation. I'll tell you a very brief fact about our soldier. He was evacuated using a drone ambulance, Mol. Our fighter had been wounded and stuck at his position for 33 days, and Mol transported him over 60 kilometers. This story was shown all over the world, literally, I think, in different countries, and you probably saw it too. Well, the president awarded state honors to those who were involved in this unique evacuation. By the way, I think, though I don't have any information on this, that this soldier will be awarded. And I really hope that the sergeant who stayed with him at the position is alive and well, will make it out, and will definitely receive his award. But today, our defenders need our help again. We are continuing to collect donations for our warriors, for the 95th Separate Air Assault Brigade. This is for the unit of Ivan, already known to you, with the call sign Pastor. Vanya is from Kharkiv. His call sign Pastor is not just for show. He is a real pastor in a church. But now he is a defender of Ukraine. As soon as the occupiers came, he took up arms, suffered multiple concussions. He is currently recovering in the hospital. We corresponded recently. He keeps wanting to run back to his comrades. Well, in general, Titan warrior, just titanium. So let's help our warriors and his brothers in arms. They need a car now, and the link to the collection is in the description of this video. We're going well, I think, for a couple of days, and we're going to have this meeting. We'll close it. There's Mono, there are private accounts, there's PayPal for those who want to help from abroad, for Vanya Pastor and for his unit. And as I always tell you, friends, just a huge thank you. Truly, you can't imagine how powerful we are together. If you didn't see the details here, there's a QR code you can use as well. Let's help our warriors. Ukraine stands thanks to people like Vanya Pastor. I couldn't ignore this news. a performance in Italy by opera singer Abdrazakov, who supports the war and Putin, was cancelled. There is a singer named Ildar Abdrazakov who was excluded from performing in the opera Don Giovanni at the Italian Fondazione Arena di Verona. This was reported by the Vice President of the European Parliament, Pina Picerno. Well then, do you know why I couldn't ignore this news? Because in 2024, this Abdrazakov became a trusted representative of Putin in the elections and the artistic director of a theater in Sevastopol, my hometown of Sevastopol, where I was born, which is now occupied just like all of Crimea. And I think what's going on there in Sevastopol, by the way, Sevastopol has been terribly ruined in the place on the site of a unique historical architectural monument, Chersonesus Storica. They put up some kind of hideous new construction. Just imagine Chersonesus Storica, the columns, I remember those columns from childhood, the performances at the Summer Theater, different scenes were played there. It was all really cool. And you know what they did? Pure loutishness, thuggery, military brute mentality. They just went and right on the ruins, right where Chersonesus Storica is, they put up these new buildings. But with columns, you know, those tacky interiors with fake antique columns and capitals like, here's our little apartment in the ancient Roman style. That's exactly what they did there, just completely out of their minds.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
And right away I remembered another would-be Sevastopol resident, the ballet dancer Polunin. What is it with them? Is Sevastopol coated in honey or something? That very same Polunin who got himself not one but 3 tattoos of Putin's portrait. And I think, why 3? Turns out, do you know how he explained it? He met with Putin 3 times and each time he got a tattoo of Putin. Well, that explains everything. He was also appointed as the acting director of the Dance Academy in Sevastopol and the head of the Opera and Ballet Theater in Sevastopol, but he didn't stay long. He probably wanted to get a theater in Moscow or St. Petersburg. He probably thought the war would end quickly and he'd get the Mariinsky or maybe even the Bolshoi. Not just any theater, but the Mariinsky or the Bolshoi. The sanctions would be lifted and he'd be performing on the best stages again. Polunin, but things didn't turn out that way. After a while, Polunin wrote that his time in Russia was over and left the country, which means he couldn't dance in Russia either. Who even needs this Polunin in Russia anyway? And now he won't be able to dance anywhere in the world because he's been completely discredited. By the way, he was helping the Russian military. He organized all sorts of fundraisers for the occupiers. So rumor has it that he went to Israel and got a Star of David tattooed on his forehead. Well, knowing what he's like, I wouldn't be surprised. After all, he already has a tattoo of the Ukrainian trident on his arm. And when I saw a photo of him with Putin on his chest and he's pulling his shirt aside with the hand that has the trident tattoo, trident and Putin together, I thought, are you insane or what? Seriously, I mean, yeah, well, his mind has clearly gone off the rails. That's the fate of those who choose to serve Putin. I've said it many times already, something always happens to people like that. Just look at the Russian actors and singers who support Putin, who support him so fiercely, so passionately. They're either always on something, how else can you explain it, like Dyuzhev and Chechirina, or they have that crazed fanatics fire in their eyes, you know, like Mashkov always. And I wonder what came first, the chicken or the egg? So are they crazy to begin with, and that's why they joined Putin's support team? Or do they first join Putin's support team and then become crazy there? I think a normal person wouldn't go there in the first place. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We're fighting Russian propaganda on all fronts here, by the way, propaganda that Putin spends millions and millions on. In every country he has agents who whisper in people's ears, stop helping Ukraine, there's no need to help Ukraine. But the louder this whisper gets, the clearer it becomes that just a little more, and the balding muskrat will lock itself in its bunker from the inside and never come out again. So subscribe, friends. There are more of us anyway, make sure you do. Here's a wonderful piece of news that reflects all of modern Russia. Russia is once again planning to develop Siberia. Wow! Yet again, initiatives for the development of Siberia as the center of Russia's new industrialization are supposed to provide decent salaries, subsidies, and benefits for citizens. This was stated by the Secretary of the Security Council, Shoigu, the very same one who built the military church, the main military church in Russia. Yes, they have that too. Both during the Russian Empire and in Soviet times, the state sought to create conditions so that citizens would willingly and gladly move to Siberia. Building and developing the national economy is very important for strengthening people's enthusiasm, Shoigu said. Here's the only part of the statement that I can probably agree with, this one. Both during the Russian Empire and in Soviet times, the state tried to create conditions so that citizens would move to Siberia. Shoigu noted that they are planning to create some kind of Siberian cluster there and that there will be certain tax benefits for them. And now just imagine, says Shoigu. A person goes to Siberia, to the Siberian cluster, spends 10 years there, as they say, from start to finish in the Siberian cluster, and all their debts are written off. Can you imagine? That's how we'll develop Siberia. How I love this ritualistic genre of Russian bureaucracy. Every time crises accumulate in the country, fantasies about new industrial centers on distant frontiers start to surface. In reality, it's not about an actual project, but rather some kind of rhetorical substitution. That is, when the authorities can't even boost the economy in already populated regions, they switch to slogans about new development. This creates some kind of illusion of movement, of strategic thinking. In other words, there's no need for results here and now. We'll develop Siberia, build the project of the century there, and so on. But the reality is that people are currently leaving Siberia. The population is declining, wages are falling. In other words, industrial enterprises are shutting down because everything is going to the war effort. Everything is for the war. These statements have no financial backing. Putin recently even claimed that his Burevestnik missile, which he tested, tests that no one has seen, this missile will help in the development of the moon. Putin said this. Shoigu, you're talking about Siberia, but Putin is already planning to develop the moon. Meanwhile, in most Russian cities, the roads look like the surface of the moon. That's true. In other words, they can't even bring gas and sewage to populated regions. What moon, you bald jellyfish? What moon? Go back, take all that orcish spawn back with you. Let them finish developing Siberia. Just look, no one, Russians always think that others want their resources, that others want their land. No, what we want is for you to stay over there where you are and not meddle with your neighbors. And over there, do whatever you want. That's the truth. Do whatever you want, really. I recently came across a video about the construction of the BAM, the Baikal-Amur main line. For some reason, in Russia, they're now starting to hype up this topic a lot. What great construction projects there were in that era. How great the Soviet Union was. And all of this is set to music. And they keep re-uploading tons of footage from that era with those Soviet songs. We're building the BAM, guys, everyone with these bright white smiles, building the railway on the Baikal-Amur main line. It all makes sense. If Russia has no future, it tries to revive the past. So, in those chronicles of the construction, everyone looks genuinely happy. The history of the Baikal-Amur main line is almost a perfect illustration of how Soviet power and Russia today combine imperial ambitions, ideological grandstanding, and complete economic irrationality. So the Baikal-Amur main line, which was started under Stalin, was only finished under Brezhnev. But do you know how many people died during the construction of the Baikal-Amur main line? According to various estimates, from 40,000 to 300,000 people were sent there during the first stage, especially under Stalin. They drove Gulag prisoners there, and they died by the thousands, tens of thousands, from cold, hunger, and disease. And during the second wave, it was no less. Again, thousands perished. But the BAM never became what it was supposed to be. They thought it would be something great, something super, but they wasted people's lives. A huge amount of resources was spent. And yet, the Baikal-Amur main line never became what it was meant to be. The freight traffic there is several times less than what was expected. That is why some historians call it a monument to senseless heroism. Yes, for some people who were there in their youth, there were student construction brigades, soldiers, prisoners. Some have good memories. Because it was their youth, that's just how it is. But I think that, and I'm sure there are some among our almost 500,000 subscribers who were there. On the main channel, there are 462,000 subscribers, and the English language channel will soon reach 15,000. So there are definitely people who have been there. Share your impressions. I'm sure many will find it interesting. The US has decided to open a military base in Syria. Putin, I don't know what kind of episode this is today. The geopolitical strategist has outplayed everyone again. While Putin is trying to negotiate with the new Syrian authorities to keep his military bases, the US is setting up their own base there. As they say, in a big family, you have to stay sharp. But overall, Assad's flight and the withdrawal of Russian troops from Syria seem to me to be one of Putin's biggest geopolitical defeats in recent years. Well, if we're talking about the war, that's a whole separate issue. It stands apart from everything else. By the way, Putin still hasn't handed Assad over to the new president of Syria, even though that was one of the main conditions when he came to Moscow. Incidentally, it's still not known for sure whether Assad is alive or not. From time to time, there are reports that he's living somewhere in Moscow City, that he bought several apartments there, that he has a mansion in the Moscow suburbs, but no one sees him, no one knows where he is. For Putin, he poses a serious threat because he knows too much. That is, he knows about secret RSI operations in Syria, about the Wagner PMC, about arms supplies to Iranian proxies, about the use of chemical weapons, who assisted in this, whose weapons they were, and so on and so on and so on. In short, Assad is a bearer of unpleasant secrets for Putin. But what is his value now? I don't know where Putin himself will run, but I'm sure that moment will come. On the other hand, it seems to me that he won't run anywhere. Russia is the kind of country where, once they realize it's all over, as they say, they'll quickly pack him up themselves, Patrushev, Narishkin, or someone else, and hand him over wherever needed in exchange for some kind of amnesty for themselves. Or maybe they'll just hit him over the head with a snuff box. Or they'll let him go, open up that pen of Putin's replicants under the Kremlin. I don't know how many of them there are, but definitely more than one. They'll be released, set free, and then their own people will catch up with them and finish them off. Friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and let's help Vanya Pastor and his unit, the heroes who are defending our Ukraine. The details are in the description of this video. Wishing us all a peaceful day. Glory to Ukraine.